What's up guys, Mystic Weasel here, and 2024 was an amazing year for picks. On the last card, I got 9 correct out of 13 fights, 5 out of 6 confident picks. So confident picks are anything that's at least 70-30 for a fighter. So if I give a fighter a 70% chance, that's a confident pick. So let's continue with the comeback card, returning with a fight night after our month hiatus without any UFC fights. The rematch the fans have been dying to watch between the dominant striking virtuoso MacKenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas, who's a cool fighter. A marvelous start to 2025. At least their fights, returning to a fight night card. I mean, Chris Curtis versus Roman Kopylov should be the main event. If we had to pick one fight on this card, that is main event quality over the rest. Oh, they have Tajikistan Khabib on this card? Thiago Moises? Ihor Potiera with a celebration dance? Undefeated Jacobe Smith. You know what? This card ain't that bad. It's just the headliners, especially the main event. But let's start with the prospect of the night. The best prospect on the card is Austin Bashi. Very good grappler, undefeated, amazing performance in the Contender Series. The stake of the night, the fighter that needs a win is Santiago Ponzinibbio. He's on a 2-loss streak. A lot of people thought that he beat Muslim Salikov, but at 38 years old, I think regardless if he wins or loses, especially if he loses, I think it's time to retire at that point. I mean, he's a great commentator. He has a career outside of fighting. I don't understand the language, but people say that Santiago Ponzinibbio is a very good commentator, so I would love to see him pursue that career at the fullest. Unlike Armin Saryukin for MMA, apparently. He says he's not 100% focused on MMA. Santiago, with 100% focus at commentating, would be excellent. The fighter of the night, there really isn't one. Amanda Ribas is cool, and I know why a lot of you guys would pick MacKenzie Dern. I don't disagree, but this is fighting, okay? This is fighting. Amanda Ribas, I guess, would be the fighter of the night. She won the first fight. She's in the main event. Won her last strawweight fight. So, Ribas. Sleeper of the night. The most underrated fight on the card that could be really good, I would say, is Christian Rodriguez versus Austin Bashi. Rodriguez usually does very well against these prospects. He shuts them all down, and they tend to be decent fights as well. And Austin Bashi's a good finisher, very good grappling. That should be a good fight. The banger of the night is, of course, Cesar Almeida versus Abdul Razak Al Hassan. That is definitely anybody a knockout. I'd be surprised if that fight gets out of the first round, honestly. Unless Abdul uses his judo and doesn't want to strike with the kickboxer. The fight of the night is Chris Curtis versus Roman Kopylov. That should be a very good fight, actually. Great striking between the two. Chris Curtis more of a boxer, Roman Kopylov more of a kickboxer. Neither fighter likes to wrestle. That's honestly a great fight. This actually should be the main event. But let's begin with the Tajikistan Khabib, whose real name is Nurullo Aliev, versus Joe Solecki. I'm going with Aliev. He's a good wrestler, had a very tough fight against Rafael Alves, and the fight was about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, which is not great. Joe Solecki has been more active. He's had 2 fights since then. They actually both fought on the same card, on that Andre Muniz and Brendan Allen card in 2023. But Joe Solecki has not won a fight since then. He got KO'd by Drakkar Klose, slammed on the mat, knocked out, which is not great going into this Aliev fight. And he also lost to Grant Dawson. Grant Dawson's a good grappler as well. But he lost both those fights because of the grappling. He's going to have a very, very tough one with Aliev. But the thing is, Solecki's good on the ground. He has dangerous submissions. I just don't think it's going to matter much in this Aliev fight. It's very hard to have a dangerous guard in modern MMA these days, unless you're like on the level of Charles Oliveira, and Solecki is not that. He's good, but there are levels to submissions. I don't think it's enough to submit Aliev. That would be crazy, though, if he does. Yeah, and Aliev is a minus 540 favorite. That's insane. Should be an easy fight for him. They're going to Fatima Kline versus Viktoriia Dudakova. I don't know why Dudakova is such a big underdog. She's a plus 615. Like, I am going with Kline. She's faster, seems to have more punching power, dangerous on the ground. Had a great fight with, I could never say her name right, Jasmine Jasudavicius. No matter how many times I hear it, it's just so hard to say her name. But had a great fight with her, back and forth in moments. Viktoriia Dudakova had a split decision loss to Sam Hughes. She's slower, she's not as dynamic in any area. She has decent wrestling though. She's well-rounded, but I think Kline is going to win. Definitely should not be a minus 900 favorite. That is insane. Any bettors out there, avoid betting on Kline as a straight bet. Parlay, maybe, but she could lose that fight. But I think she wins by decision. They're going to Magomed Gadzhiyasulov versus Bruno Lopes. I think I said that one right. I'm going Gadzhiyasulov. He's the better wrestler, of course. He's well-rounded, faster on the feet, even though he's not as technical. Bruno Lopes has decent boxing skills, definitely better than Magomed's, but sometimes he'll sit in the pocket, throwing hands, and he get tagged himself. He ate some big shots when he fought Flavio Magon in the Thunder fight promotion. Went to get the fight to the ground after. He has a decent takedown, but he's not going to out-wrestle Magomed. So that's the only thing. Like, his offensive boxing is great with combinations. Goes to the body, goes to the head, good hooks, jab straight combo, and just continues to chain together punches until the opponent is out of there. But at the same time, his defense isn't there. He'll drop his hands at times. He won't block or slip punches. Magomed, being the faster fighter, could land some big shot in those those kind of exchanges, but I do think the wrestling is going to be the biggest difference. Magomed by a decision. Ernesta Kareckaite versus Nicolle Caliari. This is a tough fight. Both fighters are decent kickboxers. They both have a kickboxing background somewhat, and Ernesta is much taller, way longer, 5'9" for the weight class, whereas Caliari is 5'3". And Ernesta is just the better striker, clearly. She's more technical, she hits harder. The thing though, her grappling didn't look great against Diane Barbosa, and that's what makes the fight very hard to pick here, because she got her back taken, take it down very easily at times, and even though Cagliari's not like the best grappler in the world or anything, she does have good submissions and taking opponents down from the clinch as well. She even reversed a head and arm throw. That alone gives her a lot of points for me. It might make me just pick her to win, but then she did get decimated by Kay Hansen. Should have been me. No, I'm kidding. But I might go with Ernesta very slightly. Maybe like a 55-45, but certainly not a minus 275 favorite, which is way too much. She could get taken to the ground, and she could get submitted. Then we go to Preston Parsons versus Jacobe Smith. You have to go with Jacobe Smith. Amazing wrestler. Wrestled for Oklahoma State. The guy's built like a brick house. Super strong. He had a catch weight at 200 pounds. So this is a welterweight fight, right? He had a fight at 200 pounds against someone who was about 10 pounds heavier than him in the fight. And bro was ragdolling that giant effortlessly. He has powerful ground and pound. Striking is going to go to Parsons, though. Parsons is definitely the better striker of the two. But I think he's going to be outmatched there. He's got to keep the fight standing, stop all the takedowns. He got taken down by Oban Elliott, who is not the same kind of wrestler Jacobe Smith is, or as physically strong. It's going to be a tough fight for Parsons, I think. But if he can keep the fight standing, I think he has a very good chance of winning. Get to those takedown defense drills, man. But I'm going with Smith by a second round TKO due to ground and pound. Then we go to Thiago Moises versus Trey Ogden. Both fighters are excellent grapplers. Good submissions, good top position, but I think Thiago Moises is going to stop the takedowns and just punch out Trey Ogden into a TKO finish. He has much better striking than Trey Ogden, who stays on the fence, has a good long jab, but not much power in his shots, not really confident in his stand-up. Every chance tries to get the fight to the ground, and I think Moises just stops the takedowns, beats him in the striking, TKOs in maybe second or third rounds. Then with a Marco Tulio versus Ihor Potiera. Tulio's a minus 530 favorite. Bro, they aren't giving Ihor any chance in like any of his fights, besides a few. The only time he was ever a favorite was against Shogun, and he's had 7 fights in the UFC. Massive underdog in most of them. But I'm going with Marco Tulio. He's just too powerful. He's better in the stand-up. Tulio's good. You just can't go with Ihor Potiera in this fight. He doesn't have the striking defense, overextends with some of his punches, doesn't have a good guard. But I don't know if you guys feel the same way. I want to see Ihor win. Maybe not this fight specifically, but I like to see him get another win. Bro's been getting destroyed ever since he knocked out Shogun. He's had 1 win since, but I'm going with Tulio by a second round knockout. Tulio's a good striker, man. He could be one of your future top 10 light heavyweights. Then we go to Jose Johnson versus Felipe Bunez. For the flyweight division, Jose Johnson is enormous. The guy is 6 feet tall with a 71.5-inch reach, and he has a lot of knockout wins for a flyweight. No coincidence there. The guy's bigger and stronger and more powerful than most of them. He has to be by default, right? And Felipe Bunez is 5'7", clearly the smaller fighter of the two. They have to do something about this weight cutting thing, man, because there's no way a guy at the size of Jose Johnson should be fighting a flyweight. It's crazy. Also, Almobayev landed a wheel kick to the head on this giant, but mostly uses wrestling to win that fight. But Felipe Bunez is not as good of a wrestler as Almobayev is. He's very good on the ground. He did fight a lot of Russians, so maybe some of their wrestling skill rubbed off on him, and he can win the fight through that. Because I think if the fight goes to the ground, he has a massive advantage. On the feet, I think Jose Johnson has the advantage. Even also Almobayev, good striker, missing the majority of his punches that he was throwing, just because of the reach. And not his fault. He fought a fighter who was practically the same height as welterweights and middleweights. Insane. So I'm gonna go with Jose Johnson. I think his size is gonna make the difference here. I think he's the better striker of the two, but we'll see. Felipe Bunez is a well-rounded fighter. If he has good enough wrestling, he could finish this fight. Should be a close fight. Then we're going to Punahele Soriano versus Uros Medic. Two good southpaw strikers. Medic is more technical. He stays on the outside, finds his shots better, powerful with his own strikes, but Punahele Soriano is definitely going to have more punching power, but he gets reckless. So there are a lot of openings for Medic to land his shots when Soriano's trying to get in close, but he could also land some of those creative techniques like the spinning back fist that he landed on Matthew Semmelsberger, threw the flying knee at Alan Cruz and barraged him with a bunch of shots. I think Medic is the better technical striker in this one. I'm going to go with him to win by a knockout. Soriano can get very wild in moments when he really shouldn't, right? I understand Uros Medic does that when he hurts his opponent. He can get wild at times there, but he's usually very composed before he hurts them, and that's more important. Soriano will get reckless just to hurt his opponent, which makes him way more vulnerable to a knockout. So I'm going with Uros Medic by a first-round knockout. Should be a good fight. Then we go to Christian Rodriguez, the prospect killer, versus the undefeated Austin Bashi. I'm going with Austin Bashi. In the featherweight division, Christian Rodriguez is not as good as he was at bantamweight, but it's because he missed weight twice in a row against Raul Rosas Jr. and Cameron Simon. He won both those fights, and ever since going up to the featherweight division from them, he had a very tough time with Isaac Dolgarian, lost to Julian Erosa. He's small for the weight class. He's like in between. If there was a 140-pound division, that's where he would be. Julian Erosa was much bigger than him. Austin Bashi's going to be bigger than him. Austin Bashi's a much better wrestler. You're going to take him to the ground and most likely submit him. So I'm going to go with Austin Bashi, overpowering Christian Rodriguez, taking him down and getting a rear naked choke. Rodriguez needs to get to 135. He's so much better there. At featherweight, he's just too small. He only has one loss at bantamweight. It was like the second fight in his career. Every other loss has been in another weight class, either catchweight or featherweight. He's able to use his skills much better in the bantamweight division and not just get overpowered by his opponent, which I think Bashi is going to do. So I'm going to go with Austin Bashi by a second round submission. And then we go to Chris Curtis versus Roman Kopylov, the real main event of the Fight Night card. Great striking match, but I'm going with Roman Kopylov. He just has way more tools in the striking. Chris Curtis is very limited with his boxing. He's flat-footed. He's good at what he does. He's very good with his hands. Good at blocking punches, slipping and rolling with shots. But when Roman is throwing 2 or 3 punch combinations, ending some of them with high kicks, it changes the head movement and the way that Chris Curtis has to defend strikes. And the thing is, he hasn't fought a lot of fighters that throw kicks like Roman Kopylov. The only 2 guys were Nasruddin Imavov and Joaquin Buckley. None of the other guys are as dynamic with their striking as Roman Kopylov. Like Brendan Allen isn't. Marc-Andre Barrios is very average with it. Kelvin Gastelum is more of a boxer. Jack Hermanson, more of a boxer, can do everything though, but not with the same kind of dynamic power and velocity of Roman Kopylov. Adolfo Vieira, Phil Haas, and the flat-footed style of Chris Curtis is going to make it hard to get in on Roman and land the shots that he wants. And the fact that Curtis doesn't fight at a very fast pace is going to allow Roman to constantly move around the octagon and use all of his tools the best he can. And even though Chris Curtis is mostly a boxer, he can throw decent kicks at times. Like, he dropped some guy in the Contender Series with a hook kick. He threw in a Nasruddin Imavov, some body kicks, a lot of lead leg kicks, but he was reaching it with his punches, and those are the kind of moments where Roman can land some of his shots and follow up with head kicks. It's not the exact same fight, but the best fight to watch from Chris Curtis is that Nasruddin Imavov fight. It's the most similar opponent that he fought. The movement was giving Curtis a lot of issues, a lot of the jabs and lead kicks, keeping him at range. Roman Kopylov would try to land that knockout shot more than Nasruddin Imavov was, because for a lot of that fight, Imavov was just pestering from range to keep Curtis away. So I'm gonna go with Roman Kopylov by a third round TKO. He lands a head kick and finishes the fight with ground and pound, but should be a good fight. And then we go to Cesar Almeida versus Abdul Razak Al Hassan. I'm going with Cesar Almeida. He's way better of a striker, much more technical, higher fight IQ. Abdul hits very hard though. That guy is powerful, extremely reckless, could get KO'd walking into Almeida, but there are some fights from Abdul where he was a lot more composed and used more of his judo, clinched up with his opponent. I wonder if he goes that direction. But the thing is, Cesar Almeida's fought opponents like that before, who didn't want to strike with him. Even Roman Kopylov shot many takedowns in their fight, which is kind of insane. Lucas Fernando, Dylan Budka, Roman Kopylov, and Ihor Potiera all took down Cesar Almeida at least 3 times in each of those fights, and he still won 3 out of the 4, and nearly won the fight against Roman too. Split decision loss. He's had a lot of experience already with fighters wrestling with him and not trying to strike as much as he wants. The thing is, Abdul doesn't have the same kind of cardio some of those guys did. He's very explosive, very fast twitch, will slow down after the first or second rounds. Body shots are big for Cesar. And even if Abdul takes him to the ground a few times, I think Cesar will eventually get back up to his feet and win in the late rounds. I'm going third round knockout, Cesar Almeida, after Abdul gasses. And then we go to the co-main event, Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Carlston Harris. These guys might retire in the next few years. I mean, they've been fighting for a long time. They're both nearly 40. Every time Santiago fights, you think about him in his prime, or lack of that. We saw him against Neil Magny. He looked amazing in that fight. And he was supposed to fight Kamaru Usman, but his prime was mostly spent fighting a blood infection, and when he came back, he was not the same fighter. He was so good back then. Amazing jab, decent takedown defense, good footwork, but now going up against Carlston Harris, who's a good wrestler, has good submissions, good top control, but he got knocked out by Chaos Williams, and Santiago also hits very hard. It's hard to say who's going to win this fight. Santiago's a better striker, Harris is the better wrestler. The last thing to go is power. Harris is okay in the stand-up. He's not extremely technical, and I think Santiago's jab is going to be a big weapon in this fight to line up the right hand, dropping Harris, getting that knockout in the third round. So I'm going with Santiago in a very competitive fight, but ending it with a knockout win. Gets on the mic and retires. And then we go to the main event, when it should be Curtis versus Roman. The rematch between MacKenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas. I'm going with Amanda Ribas by decision. Dern is way too inconsistent as a fighter. There's times she looks like she's a top contender, like a very good fighter. Decent enough striking, amazing on the ground as always. And then there's fights where it looks like she never even hit pads before. Windmilling punches from range like she used to when she first got into the UFC. She's been in the UFC for how long now? since 2018, and her striking barely improved ever since. There's like a few fights where she was performing very well in the stand-up, but then even fights after, where her striking should look even better, it looked like it regressed to her UFC debut or something. It's insane. Amanda Ribas is much more consistent. She's decent in the stand-up, decent on the ground, good footwork. She beat MacKenzie Dern before. Her footwork gives her issues. Dern misses many punches, and Ribas could defend the takedowns just like she did before. And in their first fight, Ribas defended every single takedown from MacKenzie Dern, and even took down Dern herself and still won the fight. Her wrestling has only gotten better ever since. A consistent evolution in her wrestling and grappling, where we don't see the same from MacKenzie Dern striking, or her wrestling either. What's up with jiu-jitsu guys and not learning how to wrestle? If these jiu-jitsu guys learned how to wrestle, then they would actually be a big threat in MMA. If they learn how to take fighters down and use their jiu-jitsu on top, they would be 10 times better than what they are. That's what every jiu-jitsu guy has to do, and that's what made like Jacare Souza so good. And Glover Teixeira, like these two guys learned how to wrestle and use their jiu-jitsu offensively instead of countering the opponent because they took them down. MacKenzie Dern doesn't do that. So I'm going with Amanda Ribas. It's literally one of the most frustrating aspects of a fighter where all they do is jiu-jitsu and they don't know how to take the other fighter down. Then what is the point of your jiu-jitsu? Ribas is the better striker of the two. Dern has more punching power. She's been 5 rounds more than Ribas has, but I'm going with Ribas by decision, man. And how are the betting odds looking on this card? So Amanda Ribas is about minus 200 favorite. I agree with that. Cesar Almeida, like a minus 275. I agree with that as well. Santiago, a slight favor over Carlston Harris. I agree with that. Roman Kopylov, like a 275 favorite. I agree with that. Austin Bashi, about the same. Uros Medic, about the same. Marco Tulio, big favorite. I agree with that as well. Jose Johnson, like a minus 180, minus 190. I agree with that. Thiago Moises, same. I agree with like every line on this card. Going against any of these lines is foolish, except one. The Fatima Kline versus Viktoriia Dudakova. Those odds are kind of crazy. Even though Kline should win the fight, once you get to like a minus 1,000 and minus 900, it better be John Jones versus CM Punk or something. And that fight ain't that. And also I think Ernesta should not be that big of a favorite. But for the rest, I agree with. And actually, also Jacobe Smith, I do think he should win, but minus 500, minus 550 is kind of crazy. He's more like a minus 200 or 300. But yeah, I think it's foolish to go against any of these odds. At that point, you just hate money. There's gonna be some people who are like, Weasel, why would you pick every favorite? Pick an underdog. I'll pick an underdog if I think that underdog is going to win. I don't think any of these underdogs win. Those are my predictions, picks, and odds, and all that stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you guys did, make sure to give the video a like, make sure to subscribe with the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.